is underway for the Belgian Grand Prix. Great start for Lewis Hamilton. He's up to second place. He's immediately past Sergio Perez. Charles Leclerc holds the lead. The two McLarens are side by side, and he's onto the gravel in the background for Lando Norris. Gives an opportunity to George Russell. Side by side we go with Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez into Eau Rouge. No, Hamilton's ahead. He gets the move completed. Leclerc, then Hamilton, then Perez, then Piastri. Wide moment for Lando Norris. Cost him places. Max Verstappen up one position to 10th place as Perez fights back, looking to reclaim second position. Charles Leclerc has the lead for the moment. Can George Russell go around the outside of the McLaren? So close. It is Leclerc, then Hamilton, then Perez, the top three.
Norris losing 3 positions at the start, running wide into the gravel, and look, just behind him, Max Verstappen has gained a couple of places already. So there's only 2 cars between Norris and Verstappen at this early stage.
This was the 5 red lights going out, and immediately Perez knew he was in trouble.
Yeah, and from Hamilton's position here, it's actually easy to send it in and nerf the back of the Ferrari ahead, but he measures that part well, gives Perez space on the exit as Norris runs wide and loses all the momentum at the start of a long run. Verstappen right in behind Alex Albon. He's got a bit of downforce on that Red Bull. He's got a lot more than the Williams. He's going to sweep all the way around the outside.
Outside line to the inside line, passing at will and making places early on because he knows he needs to go on the charge. And does Albon fancy a go back? No. And that's the side of a 7-time world champion, getting closer and closer still. He's won this Grand Prix on 4 occasions. He's trying to take the lead from Charles Leclerc. Now with the help of DRS, out of the slipstream to the race lead for Lewis Hamilton. And we have a new leader. The 7-time world champion is at the front of the field. Hamilton leads the Belgian Grand Prix. High pressure for all of the crews in the pit lane. Mercedes have delivered, and in the background, it's a 2.7 stop for Verstappen in the Red Bull. Hamilton's come in from the race lead. So is Sergio Perez. Also in there in the background is Oscar Piastri, who was told to come in. So a crucial moment that releases Sainz, Norris, and the new race leader is Charles Leclerc, who finds himself back on to the racetrack. Lewis Hamilton back onto the racetrack. Now, where is Russell? Where is Verstappen? And this is crucial. Russell's getting past Oscar Piastri. So going to the new rubber earlier on has worked for George Russell. Can Piastri do something about it immediately?
So can he do the move that Russell did on Tsunoda? Russell checks the mirrors. The McLaren is right with him.
They've got the same power unit in the back of the car, but Piastri has to go on the attack here. Vital that he gets to the inside of Russell for his Grand Prix. He needed to make the move, and he did. It's only for 9th. Could be greater points later on. What an enthralling Belgian Grand Prix. We go onto the Kemmel Straight, building up to 200 miles an hour. And the orange McLaren ducks out of the slipstream, trying to move ahead against Sergio Perez. And Piastri has another pass as he moves up to 6th position. He is a contender to win this one. As Lando Norris comes in to make his pit stop, leaves into the fast lane he goes, 2.3 seconds. And Lando Norris lights up the rear tyres, goes back to work.
This is into Stavolo for Sainz. It's a big snap on the entry. Hamilton radioed and said the rear tyres were going, but they certainly are on the hard-shod Ferrari as well.
That's more of a gravel brush than I was expecting. He will be lucky to keep it pointing in the right direction as we climb the hill. Is this the best opportunity for George Russell, the winner of the Austrian Grand Prix earlier in the year? Perez knows it, goes defensive, nothing he can do. DRS open, Russell breezes by and takes 4th place. So George Russell asking the team to consider extending. Lewis Hamilton coming in for a vital stop. The race leader comes into the pits. Mercedes go to work. And it's a 2.4 second stop to give himself a great chance of covering off Charles Leclerc. Norris trying to get past the first of 2 Red Bulls he will hope that he overtakes in this Grand Prix. Perez is the driver. He is passing. And Norris gets up to 6th position. He will try and go chasing after Max Verstappen. Verstappen's trying to catch his teammate, Oscar Piastri.
How much quicker do I need? Am I plugging the DM or not? It's close. It is close.
Piastri's close to Leclerc again.
Now, Piastri's had one dry run at this. Can he get by this time around? Charles Leclerc looking in the mirrors. Piastri wants that inside line. Leclerc is not going to give it to him. So going the long way round and taking the position is Oscar Piastri, who fights his way to 3rd. And now he's going to heap the pressure on the Mercedes. Russell's tyre saving. Hamilton's trying to catch him. And they're going to have to deal with the pace of Oscar Piastri. George Russell called the shots, wanted a one-stop. Everyone else came in for fresher rubber. He's trying to nurse that hard tyre all the way to the end. That's the good part of the sentence. The bad part of the sentence is that Lewis Hamilton is 3.7 seconds away. Here's Sainz trying to improve from 8th to 7th, and he's done it. He gets by Sergio Perez, and that long stint has given him a points gain up against the Mexican driver, P7 for the Ferrari man.
And Russell is getting good drive off La Source. Again, he opens up the gap towards 7/10. And if Hamilton can't come past Russell, he'll at least have the DRS to defend from Piastri, who is getting closer and closer. We're on the penultimate lap, and I don't think he's going to be able to make it.
He's not there, Jolien. How can this be possible from George Russell? And it's Russell versus Hamilton, Mercedes versus Mercedes, with a McLaren close by to win the Belgian Grand Prix.
Hamilton has a lock-up at La Source. This is the last big opportunity with DRS on the horizon over the crest of Radion. And again, Russell's done enough on the exit. He's holding Hamilton at arm's length.
Russell immediately knows that he needs to break the toe. Lewis Hamilton is the driver with DRS. Oscar Piastri is in third position. How close, how brave, how late dare Hamilton go? He can't get there. He can't make the move. And George Russell is closing in on one of the most extraordinary and audacious strategy calls that we've seen in years in Formula One. It's going to go all the way to the checkered flag. One chicane remains. Lewis Hamilton is chasing George Russell all the way to the end of the Grand Prix, but it'll be a Grand Prix claimed inexplicably with driving brilliance from the wheel of George Russell, who takes one of the greatest drives you will ever witness to the top step of the podium. George Russell wins the Belgian Grand Prix. All the other big teams went for a two-stopper with both drivers. Mercedes heard the call. Russell demanded one. Russell takes his third career victory by half a second across the line to deny Lewis Hamilton. The podium is completed by Oscar Piastri. How did he do that?
Amazing strategy. You guys are the best. Come on. It's a pretty good drive. Yeah, that was right. Yes! Tire Whisperer. Tire Whisperer.
This is the Outlap F1 podcast featuring America's own Cody, Andy, and Deanna. Your one-stop shop for Formula One news, insights, race previews, and reviews. Join us on the Outlap. What is up, Outlap F1 Nation? This will be season 6. This is episode 30, the big 3-0. It's the 2024 Belgian GP review show. It's our last review before the summer break, and this one will be dripping with news and facts and all other sorts of good stuff. You've got Andy, and I'm along with Cody tonight. Cody, it is great to see you again, sir. And how you doing?
I'm doing great. Kind of sad that we're going to be off here for a whole bunch of weeks before the next Formula One stuff comes around. But yeah, having less news, probably less stuff going around in the Formula One world means I've got less to distract me from things I really should be doing, like planning a wedding and all kinds of stuff like that.
I haven't said it formally on the podcast, but congratulations on all of that. I am versed in what is going on, and hopefully, if we can get all the logistics right, we're going to have one hell of a time. Yeah. And we're going to have, hopefully, memories that we can share with a lifetime. And we'll share, hopefully, we can maybe even share some of them with the audience here, if all goes according to plan. Lots of planning between now and then, but we're going to do our best to try to do that. But that's not why you're all here. You're here because you'd like to get our takes on Formula One and this Belgian GP, which was just absolutely dripping with drama from start to finish, and then even afterwards, it just wouldn't let you go. Also, a number of new people have apparently decided to check us out. So thank you so much to the recent viewers on YouTube. The numbers were actually quite astounding to both Cody and I. So if you've found our show, welcome along. We do this all the time. We do a race review, we do a race preview on the start of a weekend, and then we recap all that happened at the end of the weekend. We hope you enjoy what you sampled, and we hope you enjoy us moving forward. So if you'd like to be a constant watcher of our stuff, welcome along, as David Croft would say. Where can you find us? You can find us always on Twitter or X, whatever that platform is still called, as long as it's still kind of functioning. Every time I try to use it, it seems like it gets a little bit harder, but I'm still there, dang it. You can also find us Instagram, Discord, Reddit, and of course on YouTube. At Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle for all of that. We do put our link tree in all of our postings when it comes to finding our content, so you can see our link tree and find all the various ways with which you can consume our content. If you are on YouTube and you do like what you're seeing and you enjoy what you're hearing, you can do as they do and smash that subscribe button or leave us a like. And if you're on your favorite podcasting app, if you want to be nice and give us a 5-star review, if you enjoy the content, that just helps us all come up a little bit better in search results. That's what all of that stuff does. Why does every person on YouTube ask you to subscribe and like? It's so that it helps you come up a little bit better in search results, spread your content out a little bit. That's the dark secret. So there it is. But that's all that does. If you'd like to email the show, you can always do that. Chat now at outlapf1.com is the address that would take you there. Thank you so much to the people who do continue to support the show monetarily, including Dean Warwick, Yuri Dolchester, Paul Weaver, Quentin Warden, Kevin Kelly, Regan Stanzik, Timothy Brown, and of course, Jonathan Scott. We mentioned links. We put our link to our anchor page, $1, $5, all goes into all of our show postings. If you'd like to donate, we would be most appreciative of that. What does that do? It, number one, helps upgrade equipment we don't have or acquire equipment we don't have. And two, upgrade the equipment we currently do have so that we can record it a little bit easier, hopefully make a better product for you, the listener. That's who we're all really doing it for. So if you'd like to do that, we would be most appreciative. Last thing, before we actually hop into all of the fun of the Formula One weekend that was, you can take our code OUTLAP, it's OUTLAP, and you can take 20% off and get free shipping with the good folks at Manscaped. Go ahead and use that when you check out after you fill your cart with their amazing products. So, in true Outlap F1 podcast fashion, and I cannot stress this enough, I don't know, we're just cursed this way, or it's just our lot in life. We always have breaking news that happens when I am literally going to post the next episode. And it has happened yet again. It's always around the summer break. The one year was the tweet heard around the world with Oscar Piastri drama was literally happening as we had talked about Oscar Piastri not 8 hours earlier. But we didn't miss out too much on the stuff pre-race. There was some stuff post-race that we're going to get into as well. But the first one that broke was Esteban Ocon signing a multi-year deal with Haas. It had been highly rumored that that's where he was going to go. So this was not too much of a shocker. So, Cody, first reaction to that move. Good for Ocon, good for Haas?
Yeah, I think it is a good move for him and for Haas. Like you said, we've been hearing rumors about it for a couple weeks now, so it wasn't the biggest surprise, but it is set in stone now, and I think it will work out very well for both of them. It's kind of, at this point, a lateral move for Ocon because Alpine has not been a very strong performer this year, and Haas actually seems to have picked up the pace this year considerably. So it looks to be a pretty good move for him. I'm sure he'd be much happier moving into, say, that Mercedes seat or something like that. But it doesn't look like it's in the cards for him right now. This keeps him in Formula One, and I think that is very important for him right now because if you take an off year, as he has done in the past, it just probably makes it that much harder to make your way back into the sport. And Haas is historically not a huge fan of having too many brand new drivers in their seats at once. So this works out really well for them because you have Ollie Behrman coming in the other seat, and it's going to be his first season in Formula One. So it's going to be a real proving ground for him. And then on the flip side of that, now you have Ocon, who is I don't even remember exactly how many seasons he's been in Formula One at this point, but it's quite a few, 5-ish. I know he took a year off at one point, but he has the experience. He has been at the Renault team, now Alpine, for a while, so he knows how a team gets built up around you. And I think that experience is going to be really good for Haas and really good for working with Behrman.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a win-win. I mean, Haas, I know, don't want to go down the path of two young drivers in their stable yet again. They've done that; it didn't exactly work for them. Ocon's going to come in as kind of the guy with the experience, and the guy who knows how to set up a car and what he likes and what he doesn't like, and kind of really for the first time, he's going to be able to kind of try to build that team around his own wants and his own setup and all that. He hasn't really ever had that. Closest he's been is he's kind of been, with Alpine, it was kind of a 1-1A situation. At least that's how Alpine kind of approached it, but it was never perfect. Here, he's going to be the clear number one, the one with the experience. He gets another bite at the apple to see if he can find some magic in a bottle. And, maybe it goes somewhere. And if Haas can develop around him, then that's win-win for both of those teams. In terms of Haas, they now have a clear line of development because they can use kind of a base setup on Arlie Behrman's car, and then they can bring Behrman along as he's going to develop. So it's a good mix of both youth and experience. So I think this was probably the best thing that they were going to be able to get, given who was out there, unless they wanted to go full youth movement, which I didn't think they ever really wanted to do. So it's kind of interesting. This is now the third stop in a row where Esteban Ocon has followed one Nico Hulkenberg. So that, we just have to have symmetry there. So Hulkenberg leaves, and Ocon fills into his old seat. But anyway, speaking of Alpine, they did not go without drama. The Alpine and the Belgian Grand Prix, I don't know what it is about the Ardennes Forest or the paddock or how it's laid out or the air in Belgium, but drama always seems to follow Alpine the last few years at this race or slightly right after this race while everyone's doing their tire test. The big news that broke over the course of the weekend, Bruno Famin, their team principal, will leave the team. So he is out. I think that's the third team principal in 3 years. Wow. And apparently, not only that, but Alpine is seriously considered dropping Renault engines, their own engine that they build, in favor of possibly taking a Merc power unit for 2026. They're apparently going to go through some sort of big evaluation period over the course of the next 6 months. But the hot understanding and everybody's understanding seems to be Alpine's going to drop their own works engine in favor of a Merc power unit, given the fact that it seems like Mercedes are clearly ahead of all the development, at least in that race. And with Aston Martin leaving the Mercedes camp to go now to pair up with Honda, as they now formally come back in 2026, that opened up a supply, and it looks like Alpine wants to jump on it. So a bit to unpack here, but Cody, first thoughts on Bruno Famin, and then what's your thought on the Renault thing?
So Bruno Famin going out, it seems to be the Alpine Renault way now to give the team principal a shot, and if there aren't results quickly enough, throw them out and move on to the next. They're kind of doing the same thing with team principals that Red Bull historically has done with drivers. Don't think it's the best thing to go because now someone else is going to come in with new ideology and you're going to have to move the team in that direction, and it's going to take time. And it seems that the whole problem with Alpine is that they've had a lot of time and haven't made too many inroads into working their way up to being a top, or at this point, even really a midfield team. So I don't think it's, I guess, a great idea that they're throwing him out. But it's their decision to make, I guess. What I think is much more ridiculous is the thought of Renault and Alpine dropping their own engines in favor of somebody else. This, to me, really makes it look like that Renault wants to sell the team if they're not going to be going with their own engine program, as they have done for a long time. Renault engines have been around in Formula One for many years, and to drop that now, as well as going over to new personnel at the top of the team, it makes it really seem like they're fed up with the poor results and they want to sell the team. But apparently Renault has said that they do not intend to sell the team. So either that's a big lie until they can figure out what they're doing, or they're just really changing up the structure in new and bizarre ways.
Yeah, and it doesn't say a lot of good about the 2026 regs, which are not final. They're mostly final. We've seen the draft of them, but they haven't been adopted. And I think at the last FIA meeting, it looks like they're going to try to get everything done around October. So you're looking at the US GP, Mexico GP, Vegas stint is when you're going to get some news on what that's finally all going to look like, because, according to what everyone has wanted, they want to be able to work on these cars starting Jan 1 of 2025. So that's why everybody's trying to get all of their people in place. And you've seen all of this movement is to get everything in place so that, after everyone, fires off the fireworks and, gets their New Year's hangover out of the way, they want to be working in full blast on these 2026 cars and power units. It's supposed to be both of them. So, now you have a second manufacturer who was in favor of when the framework was adopted that is now pulling out. You had Porsche that said they were all in on this and then they backed out. Now you've got Renault that says that you're going in and you're backing out. We've already talked it multiple times on our show about Audi being a very wobbly entry, if that. So there's three. So that leaves you with your Mercedes, with Honda, and who am I forgetting? Ferrari as your power unit suppliers that would be left. You take Renault out, and now you've got Honda back in. So it doesn't look like you're going to get that menagerie of OEMs that you thought you were going to get. And from everything I've been hearing, and we talked to Giles Richards about the 2026 regs. I don't think anybody is really all gaga and oogling over these regs right now. So it's kind of an indictment on what we've kind of cooked up. And the hope is that they have time. And you hope within the next few months they really sit down and try to hash this stuff out, because if you've already lost two potential OEMs that you thought you were going to have, that's not a good look. That's exactly what these regs were supposed to encourage, and now it's not. And you've also got it where, like, the racing right now, as we're going to talk about, is so good and it's so compelling. And if you had that go and for another couple of years, what could you really have with a championship? It sounds like we're going to have next year probably be just as epic as this one, except with tight math, which is even better. That's what the hope is. Cross fingers. And then we're going to go and change it in favor of what fuel supplier is going to be your differentiators. So I just hope I hope the smart people get going on this, because it sure sounds like they need to. But if Renault doesn't want to, it may be more of an indictment on how that team is just currently structured. We've talked at length about some of the weird things that they did, with the Oscar Piastri fumble, which was an own goal that they caused themselves. The odd timing of the firing of Otmar Safnar at this race last year didn't seem to make sense. Here's another team principal move that doesn't seem to make sense. I don't know. It feels like they got to get there. They got to find a direction and find it fast. Otherwise, it's just yikes. It just looks painful for the recovery for an Alpine fan. I know there's some really nice Alpine fans out there who I've talked to, and it reminds me of what I went through in McLaren in 2015 and 2016. It just, you didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel for a very long time. It may be a long rebuild for the Alpine mark. So I hope it works out, but we'll see where it goes. We'll keep following it for sure. All right, and then we had a race to talk about. Dang it. So we will start with our headlines of the day. Cody, I'll let you go first on this one. What do you got?
My headline is, it was a slow burn, but it was a good burn. I thought that this was another race that proved Formula One racing can be very interesting and intriguing, even without big crashes, safety cars, flipping around the story. This one was really good, and we ended up coming down to, at the end of the race, the top three cars finishing very, very close together. We weren't really sure who was going to come out on top. And I got to say, it would have been even better for the story if the on-track results had stood, but they did not.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a major, major thing. We will definitely talk about what led to that, how it came about, and when it came about, because I think as a sport, as an entertainment, if that's what you're trying to package yourself as, you really kind of drop the ball here, because when you change results after everybody leaves, it's just tough. It's just, you never like that. But my headline is, we got to stop after all that? Talk about a race that just literally dripped with drama. You had 2 sets of 3 finishers that were literally all within a second of each other. And when do you ever have that? And this race just would not let you go, even after the race ended. And so you just have to love post-race significant changes to everything you thought you saw. I know it was about 4 hours from sitting down when the anthem started to when I was finally able to say, I know what the final result is. That's a lot of commitment. That's hard. So we're going to get into all of what happened, who finished where on the road, and then what happened in the steward's room after the race. All right, so we shall start all the way back on Saturday with the qualifying recap, which saw... All right, going out in P20, the Kick Sauber of Zhao Guan Yu. P19 was Logan Sargent. P18 was Yuki Tsunoda. P17 was Kevin Magnussen. And P16 was Nico Hulkenberg. So not a good start to the weekend for the Haas boys for sure. P15 saw Lance Stroll. P14 was Valtteri Bottas. P13, Daniel Ricciardo. P12 was Pierre Gasly. P11 was Alex Albon. And the top 10 from 10 to 1 were as follows. P10 saw Esteban Ocon. P9 was Fernando Alonso. P8 was Carlos Sainz. P7 was George Russell. P6 was Oscar Piastri. P5 was Lando Norris. P4 was Lewis Hamilton. P3 looked like a good start to the weekend for Sergio Checo Perez. P2 was Charles Leclerc. And in P1, boy, did he look good early and through Saturday. Wow. Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, in those tricky, wet conditions that we talked about in our preview, absolutely stomping the competition, almost 6/10 clear with a 153.159. Yikes. All right. Cody, big thoughts on the qualifying session.
I really thought, and obviously he didn't, which we're going to get to here, but I really thought that Max Verstappen had a legitimate chance of doing what he's done the past couple years and coming back from lower down in the grid and getting the win, because his qualifying performance was really strong, especially in Q3, as you said, quite a ways ahead of Charles Leclerc in P2. He made it look easy, and he's looked really good at Spa the past couple years. So I thought it was going to be him romping his way up through the field. Also, his teammate, Sergio Perez, had a pretty great qualifying session himself, starting from what eventually was going to be the front row, because as we knew, Max Verstappen had that 10th place grid penalty due to getting a new allotment of engine parts. So he ended up actually starting down in 11th, and that really is we're going to see screwed up his race day. But I thought that Perez had a pretty good chance at the win after inheriting a spot on the front row. Charles Leclerc looked like he kind of came out of nowhere for this one. I think he kind of surprised a lot of people with ending up with what would be the pole position. Very strong showing from him. Other than that, yeah, just a lot of people showing their stuff in the tricky, wet conditions. Because of that, I think we saw a lot of the top talent kind of filter to the front here. It wasn't super great start to the weekend for the Mercedes. They didn't look great in the sessions leading up to the race. As we see here, Lewis Hamilton only made his way up to 4th from qualifying, ended up inheriting that 3rd place start, but George Russell a little farther back. Other than that, if we look at the back of the grid here, I think that it's pretty painful that Zhou Guan Yu was in Q1 there. Was it over 2 seconds off of his teammate, Valtteri Bottas? That's not good.
The back two are probably the first two that we've now almost all but confirmed are going to be out of drives at the end of 2024, that being Zhao Guanyu and Logan Sargent. We shall talk a little bit about Williams in a little bit, as we did get some news that dropped earlier today. But in terms of looking at the qualifying, the main thing was it was very, very wet. So these were not even tricky changeable conditions. These were very wet conditions. It did the Belgian GP thing and was very wet, and the air was very heavy, and it never really even came close to drying out. And so I thought the two that suffered probably the most because of that were the two McLarens, believe it or not, in Piastri and Norris. They had showed very well in FP2 when it was dry and significantly warmer. And they had kind of come out and said, well, we went for a more dry weather setup. So didn't expect them necessarily to fight for pole. But, that's decent. Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, he's always been a master of the changeable conditions. So that's not surprising. The big surprise, I think, out of here is Charles Leclerc. Did not see that one coming. So that may be and he's always been really good at one lap, finding a lap that can come out of nowhere. His improvement between Q2 and Q3 is actually quite remarkable. It's 0.7, or I'm sorry, it's almost not quite. It's like 4 or 5 tenths, as I'm doing my quick math here, but that's still really good improvement. Actually, the one, if you really want the 0.7, that was Max Verstappen. He just came out and stomped the field. It looked like this was going to be, I'm Max Verstappen, remember me type weekend. And then it just didn't pan out that way as it kind of turned out. But in those changeable conditions, Max was the man throughout all the qualifying sessions for sure. All right, so we flip over into Sunday. And the good news was, if you were a fan of sunny weather and it drying out, it did. And the F2 and F3 races had some changeable conditions as the track literally was drying out, some odd grip levels, and they had safety cars and crashes and spins. If that's what you wanted, that's what you got. If just look at those feature races over the course of the weekend. But we ended up pretty much by the time we got to F1 race time with a dry track. It was more green, obviously, because there hadn't been a lot of rubber laid down, but we had a dry, warm racetrack. So we shall start, as we are apt to do, with those back markers. And Zhao Guanyu's weekend just didn't get any better. He had an engine bug that caused the engine to go out. They did a control alt delete while he was literally rolling down the hill. Managed to get it going again. Did manage to get it back to the pits, but he gets the dreaded DNF, only completing 5 laps. So the way we're going to do the classifications, I'm going to tell you where they finished on the road, and then we will deal with the post-race stuff. So it's going to look a little bit weird how we do this. But P19 was actually Nico Hulkenberg, P18 Logan Sargent, P17 Yuki Tsunoda, P16 Valtteri Bottas, P15 was Kevin Magnussen, P14 was Pierre Gasly, and P13 on the road as they finished was Alex Albon in the Williams. All right, Cody, big thoughts here in the back markers.
Honestly, I don't think we really saw a whole lot of these back markers during the race. I did feel bad for Zhou Guanyu, who qualified at the back, and as you said, it just seemed to go from bad to worse with him having the only retirement of the race, and pretty early on at that. Also, pretty poor one during the race for Haas. Their poor qualifying really didn't allow them to go anywhere during the race. Nico Hulkenberg back in P18. You got Kevin Magnussen, P14. So not the best one for them. I would say overall, not really sure what was going on with Yuki Tsunoda here. He has rarely been clearly outshined in a weekend by Daniel Ricciardo, but he really didn't look too good here. Daniel Ricciardo ends up after the steward's room stuff that happened, ended up actually, netting a point, which we'll talk about here. But yeah, Tsunoda, quite a ways off the pace from him this weekend.
Yeah, not a lot of movement in the back markers. The two main themes is we're going to talk about when we get in the midfield, and then certainly the podium. The new track surface led to two things: less tire drag, which surprised everybody, and it made it harder to overtake because everybody had so much grip. So your DRS zone, you only talk about 75 meters. You don't think that's a lot, but that really did actually play a role in a lack of overtaking. And then even in other places that are generally natural overtaking places, i.e. like the bus stop, it was really hard to try to make a move stick just because everybody had so much grip to where unless you were going to try to do a dive bomb move that wasn't ever going to get stopped, you really couldn't get alongside anybody. So, those were two themes as we're going to talk about when we get into now the midfield and obviously the podium. And I think it's probably better to just kind of talk about these two groups together because it kind of spans both of them if you're actually thinking about the overall result. So the midfield, as they finished on the road, saw P12 was Lance Stroll. P11 on the road was Daniel Ricciardo, but we'll talk about what happened there. P10 was Esteban Ocon. P9, the quieter version of the one-stop strategy, that was one Fernando Alonso, the one-stopper we're not talking about. P8 was Sergio Perez. P7 was Carlos Sainz. P6, I think he's just happy to be done with Belgium, honestly. Believe it or not, this is a career best finish for him, but it's not necessarily a great weekend. He seemed to struggle a lot on out there. That was Lando Norris. P5 turned out to be Max Verstappen, only able to recover from P11 to P5 on the road. P4 was Charles Leclerc, unable to maintain the great quality position that was kind of to be expected. P3 on the road was Oscar Piastri, who was making a hard charge, and a hard charge indeed at the top two. But P2 and P1 on the road were the two Mercedes. One was Lewis Hamilton, who had a two-stop strategy, and the other one was George Russell. And we're going to have to talk about George Russell. So I guess we should now remove the shroud. The big news after the race. George Russell finishes P1 on the road, an amazing one-stop strategy call that he made on his own, but it was not to be because approximately 40 minutes in to I'm listening to the post-race show as I do on my certain YouTube channel, and I'm in my normal group chat, and we're just kind of thinking about summer break and everything, and I will tell you who had it first. This guy is hooked in, man. Chris Medland is, when it comes to breaking stories and figuring stuff out and knowing that something was off, he had it before everybody because they all went to go look at the photo of taking George Russell and Lewis Hamilton and the miraculous 1-2 finish and said they should have taken the photo by now. Something's up. And I just saw Mercedes go by the FIA. So what happened was shortly after he makes that remark, the report comes out on the FIA site that says George Russell's car has been found to be underweight. And underweight is a bad thing. And that is there's usually only one remedy for that. It usually means you get kicked out. That is ultimately what happened. They weighed the car that I am aware of at least 3 different times. Once with fuel in it, once without fuel, and then a third time just in front of Mercedes representatives to make sure that there was no weird thing on the scale or any of that other stuff. George Russell gets disqualified, so everybody else moves up. So your order now becomes P1, Lewis Hamilton, P2, Oscar Piastri, P3, Charles Leclerc, P4, Max Verstappen, P5, Lando Norris, P6, Carlos Sainz, P7, Sergio Perez, P8, Fernando Alonso, P9, Esteban Ocon, and now coming into the points is P10, Daniel Ricciardo. But let's talk about the on-track stuff first. Cody, in the midfield and the podium, what were your big highlights of it? And you can include or exclude Russell as you like.
So it became pretty clear during the race that it was going to be very hard to make overtakes on track. Spa tends to be a low downforce configuration for the cars. And when you have low downforce configurations on all the cars, and we see this probably the most at Monza, the DRS has less of an effect because the wing is literally smaller. So you have less to gain out of opening up that DRS slot. And that combined with, the shortened DRS zone I'm so bad with the names of the parts of the track, but that's straight. We saw that it was really hard to make overtakes. And George Russell played that beautifully at the end because he made the call for the one-stop strategy. And coming up to the end of the race, Lewis Hamilton and Oscar Piastri were catching him quite quickly. And it looked like George would be on for a podium, which in itself would have been a fantastic result given where he started the race and the strategy that he went with. But then Lewis Hamilton catches up to him and he just can't get the pass done. And I don't think it had anything to do with team orders to hold position. It looked like he was legitimately trying to get around him for that win. Lewis Hamilton's got to be hungry for everything, just like George Russell is right now. But he could not get the move done over many laps of trying. And I really think that had to do with just that DRS was not strong enough for Lewis Hamilton to get the job done, now being in dirty air behind Russell. And because of that, Russell got to hold on to take P1 on the road. It was very close coming to the finish line between Russell, Hamilton, and Piastri because Piastri was able to close the gap significantly over those last couple laps with Russell having to go on the defensive to keep Hamilton behind him. And it made for a really great photo finish and would have made for a fantastic story for George Russell making this off strategy decision and having it work out perfectly in his favor. But like you said, it all came down to the technicalities of it. So they weighed the car, and I guess I'm not, I might not word this 100% correctly, but I believe they had not taken all of the fuel out of the car when they did that initial weighing, and it weighed at exactly the weight limit, 798 kilograms. And then that is supposed to be a dry weight. So they drained the rest of the fuel out of the car and found that it was now 1.5 kilograms underweight. And it is really sad that little bit of weight made the difference between George Russell having a fantastic victory and being disqualified and getting nothing. But those are the rules. We've seen that disqualifications like this in the past are pretty easy when it's infringing on something so clear cut. Like we saw Hamilton and Leclerc get disqualified at the USGP last year because their planks were worn down too much, and that's a pretty clear cut thing.
By 0.1 millimeter, which is like next to nothing.
It is painful too, but it's the clear cut type of infringement. You take the measurement, you take it again, you make sure that they're actually breaking the rule, and then at that point, the penalty is disqualification. So it is really too bad because he worked his ass off for that victory and now has nothing to show for it, which is pretty sad. Especially with how happy he looked on the podium and everything. But that's just how it goes, I suppose.
So I have in front of me the actual technical delegate report. I think it's just kind of fair to kind of take you through kind of the process as to what they did. So after the race, car number 63 was weighed, and its weight was 798.0 kg, which is the minimum weight required by the technical regulation Article 4.1, which is the relevant reg for this. After this, fuel was drained out of the car and 2.8 liters of fuel were removed, which, remember, you have to give 1 liter as a sample to the FIA. So they're good there. The car was not fully drained according to the draining procedures submitted by the team in their legality documents as technical regulation Article 6.6.5.2 is fulfilled. So I think that's referring to we had the liter, we then took it out. The car was weighed again on the FIA inside and outside scales, and the weight was found to be 796.5. Calibration of the inside and outside scales was confirmed and witnessed by the competitor. As this is 1.5 kilograms, so that's not a small margin here. Below the minimum weight as required by Technical Regulation Article 4.1, which has to be respected at all times during the competition, including after the race. I'm referring this matter to the stewards. They then did a hearing. They brought in Mercedes reps. They said they had no explanation as to why it was light, and therefore George Russell was disqualified. That process, actually for the FIA, this was actually a relatively quick one. It only took them about an hour. When you and I went to COTA last time and we had the whole plank thing, we went to dinner. We had a nice dinner. We came back to the room. We were getting ready to record, and blam, the phone blew up again. So, in terms of that, this was actually relatively quickly that they dispatched with this. But at the same time, it's so hard to try to, you have the podium, you have the, oh yeah moment, and George Russell's all excited. And then you got to tell him, 2 hours later that it didn't happen. And basically the way the standings work is you were never there. That's a really hard thing to swallow. It's also a hard thing to try to sell to your fans that you're trying to expand to. It was a nice, easily as you like, great finish. There were two sets of great finishes. There was the top battle for P1, which had Russell, Hamilton, and Piastri all within 2 seconds. And then you had another battle for P4 between Leclerc, Verstappen, and Norris that had 3 drivers within a second of each other. So it was DRS trains was also kind of a theme that we kind of saw. And it was really hard to overtake, which was surprising to a lot of people. And that's what really enabled this one-stop strategy to work for Russell. Looked like he had just pulled a blinder on everybody. Now, he ended up going, I think it was 36 laps or something on a set of hard tires. It's well beyond the Pirelli recommended range. And what they ultimately think happened, and I've read this a few times, so I apologize if I get it wrong, but Cody, you can maybe correct me, is they thought because the tire, normally as it wears out, is depositing bits of rubber around the track. Well, because it had worn so far through, yet maintained its grip, there was literally less tire on the car, on all 4 tires, that then everybody else would have had. That's one thing. The second mitigating circumstance is a Spa-Francorchamps only thing, in that at every other race, after you take the checkered flag and you do your cool down lap, everybody does this. Everybody runs offline and picks up bits of what David Hobbs used to call the clag. And that's the bits of rubber that have fallen off the car. And you have a very hot, sticky tire that has just done its work, and it naturally collects. It's literally like a magnet to this other set of rubber. And you see tires come back into the podium, and they're ugly-looking son of things. And they look like they've been, run through a meat grinder, basically, because they're picking up all these bit of a discarded tire. That can add, if you're talking 400 grams, which doesn't sound like a lot, but across 4 tires, that's 1.6 kilograms. So there's your weight. But you don't do that at Spa because the track is literally so long. It is the longest track on the F1 calendar. They only come down the straight, turn around, and go reverse back into the pit lane as their post-race procedure. So there was not any real opportunity to go and pick up any clag and attach it to your tire. And actually, when you look at the shot of the race-winning car, the tires actually look pretty nice and clean. And, all what George Russell wouldn't give for uglier-looking tires that were at least compliant. So it's a combination of both of those things. Because everybody else had much less life on their tires, there was literally more rubber. Now, it's interesting to me how Fernando Alonso pulls off a one-stop strategy that nobody's talking about, and his car was weighed and was found to be compliant. And we have George Russell's car who wasn't found to be compliant. So we know that everyone is always pushing the limits of weight and trying to do that. And it looked like it was just kind of a technical thing. Mercedes were kind of dumbfounded as to how it happened. They don't have a good explanation other than what I've kind of offered. That seems to be what all of the post-race stuff says about it. And they are not going to protest the penalty. So this will end here. There is no further action that's going to be taken. George Russell's 25 points are set aside. They are then instead given to Lewis Hamilton, who inherits a victory. It is victory 205?
105.
105
would be crazy.
I was going to say, that's what I thought. I was getting, it's somebody, there were lots of stats flying around. 105. I knew it would end in a 5. I apologize.
205, he would be the unequivocal GOAT for everybody.
That's true. Well, certain parts of F1 Twitter have already given him that, but, we'll leave that there. but it is a good victory for Lewis. It's probably the guy who, by all accounts, should have won the race, given what he actually did on track. I mean, I thought he manages to get around Charles Leclerc, established, and led basically from the front. It was almost a classic Mercedes-Benz Spa victory that you could have had, but for the George Russell throwing, not a wrench in his monkey, but a monkey wrench into the plans this time, as I'm actually going to say that correctly. Into all of that and just catching everybody off guard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with commentary on why Russell didn't have the weight there. Now, I agree with you that it's interesting that Fernando Alonso didn't have any issues with that. I really think that Mercedes was either pushing the limit to the utmost, and they ended up pushing it too far because they weren't expecting a one-stop strategy to happen. And it's, I haven't really seen a whole lot of people talking about this. Is you see at the finish when George Russell wins the race, Toto Wolff doesn't actually, they pan the camera over to him. He doesn't look particularly happy. And, part of me wonders if maybe someone at the team knew that this could happen with the one stop and had maybe mentioned to him, like, hey, I don't know if the car is going to be heavy enough at the end. Yeah. They didn't tell him anything, though, it's not like he could really do anything to save fuel if he was going to go for the win. But yeah, it definitely a strange set of circumstances here with this being the one track where they don't do the cool down lap, therefore they can't collect the rubber, and that does make a difference, or else all the drivers wouldn't do it. I do think, though, that they should have had enough in their calculations to give them the leeway, though, for this type of strategy, and knowing that they weren't going to be going around collecting the rubber, they should have been able to crunch the numbers and have the car be legal at the end. But if they had done that, go ahead.
Or just shut Russell down when he comes on the radio and suggests it. And you just got to, at some point you can tell him, look, the car is not set up for that. That's not going to work. We're pushing, you can do it in code. You can do it a lot of ways to say that is not a viable strategy for us. And that's just not going to get us to the end. Mm-hmm. And the team can override it and then box him. And, maybe
explain
they thought that he was going to, explain after the race. I mean, this is not the first time that Mercedes have made kind of some strange calls. I'm thinking back to a race in Monza where Lewis Hamilton was leading comfortably. And all of a sudden they come on the radio and tell him, Lewis, we need you to push now. And he starts setting purple lap after purple lap. And what they were trying to do was they were trying to get a potential 25-second advantage over P2 in case, they got a mega penalty. They were trying to cover off the potential for a penalty because they thought they were in trouble. And it turned out not to come to fruition, but nobody knew what was going on, including at the time, the driver, because they were just telling him to keep pushing. So he kept doing it. But, it was odd. I think you're absolutely right. That was probably the most subdued that I'd ever seen Toto Wolff for a 1-2, which was a shock 1-2 that nobody saw. I mean, nobody had this in their bingo card. Nobody had Mercedes. I thought that they would be good. I didn't think they'd be that good. And maybe this was kind of at least on the Russell side, maybe a reason why he was able to hold off as much. I don't know. I don't want to say that there was anything nefarious. I've not seen anything that there was anything nefarious. It seemed like somebody just oopsed somewhere. And what that oops is, I'm sure is going to get talked about internally and may come out in 6-8 weeks when we're far enough out from this. But yeah, I mean, it's a crappy result for everybody who goes there, who watches the podium, who thinks they know what it is, and then have it be changed. But I mean, it was the right thing. Look, the FIA did it 100% right. As much as I want to criticize how the FIA does stuff, this is their process. They followed the process. It went correctly. They actually did it relatively efficiently for them. So it just kind of is what it is. I mean, it bails some people out by giving them some more points that maybe they didn't quite get to, but it kind of just is, unfortunately. So, all right. Any other comments on anything else? Anybody else's race besides Russell's before we move on here?
Well, let's see here. We got a little bit. Obviously, Charles Leclerc ended up finishing on the podium with George Russell's disqualification, so a very good result for him. And he was able to hold off Max Verstappen and Lando Norris at the end of the race there. And we saw that, McLaren wasn't having the strongest weekend starting from qualifying, but they have been probably the strongest car over the last bunch of races here. And Max Verstappen had a fantastic qualifying performance, and neither one of them was able to make their way up to the podium, which was a bit surprising to me. Also, less surprising and probably disappointing is that Sergio Perez started from the front row in one of the strongest cars on the grid, and managed to slip all the way back to 8th place on the road by the end here, overtaken significantly by his teammate Max Verstappen, who started back in 11th. Another, I would say, pretty damning performance for Perez here, that he couldn't make it work. He did complain that the car was slow in the straights, because I think Red Bull, had gone more for the strength and qualifying setup here, knowing that it was going to be wet, and went with maybe a little bit of a higher downforce configuration than the other cars.
Correct.
Which ended up hurting them in the straights, where, the little bit of passing that was happening could occur. But yeah, for him to slip so far back was pretty disappointing.
Yeah, and you thought that this might have been a nail in the coffin until ... we find out today that Sergio Perez has been given there's a term in U.S. sports called the vote of confidence, which usually comes right before you get canned. Well, he's been officially given the vote of confidence. He will remain with Red Bull at least through the end of the 2024 season, according to the team. After the big meeting between Christian Horner and Helmut Marko to go over options, they've decided that the status quo is apparently good enough, and they are hopeful that in the future rounds that Sergio Perez can be more competitive. I don't know if they're seeing what they want to see or having a pipe dream at this point. I don't know what tells you. There's a lot of data points here. This is his average finish for the last 2 months. It hasn't gotten any better. He finally qualifies and is up in a good grid spot, and he can't hold it. And it wasn't even easy. The overtakes that on a track that was very difficult to overtake today, people were making it happen. Piastri made it happen. Even Lando made it happen. Max obviously got it. They got out of the way for Max. That's not surprising. Yeah. But, still, he wasn't anywhere in the mix. Of all of the leading cars, he was way off the tail end. They actually pitted him to get the point for fastest lap, which is more of a constructors championship thing than benefiting Sergio at this point. And if it wasn't for the Russell disqualification, the driver standings would look even worse for him. He's kind of bailed out by that. Like I said, there were some people who kind of got the benefit of the DQ. The McLarens look a lot better with their result, with a second and a fifth versus a third and a sixth. So that definitely looks better. Max's day looks a lot better with a fourth versus a fifth. And Charles Leclerc gets on a podium, which, you didn't expect to see that. So, it was just kind of interesting that Red Bull have decided to go with status quo. That's just kind of surprising to me too.
Now, you were talking about the McLarens here, and you reminded me of one other thing that I'm going to ask you about here, since you are the mega McLaren fan. Now, Oscar Piastri, he finishes 1.173 seconds off of the back of George Russell. So this isn't even taking into account that George Russell got disqualified. He could have. He was only 1.173 seconds off of the leader on the road. And he was even closer to Hamilton. Now, during the race, Piastri had a pit stop where he goes a little too far forward in the box. And because of that, he ended up with a little bit of a slower stop. It was like 4.4 seconds or something like that.
Yeah.
So you figure had he been in the box, we've seen a lot of teams doing like 2.4 seconds, 2.7 seconds, something like that. So he could have had his pit stop go as much as 2 seconds faster. Do you think that had he been in the box properly on that pit stop, do you think Piastri could have won the race?
So I will qualify this by, if he manages to come out in front of Hamilton, 100% yes. Because that car in clean air, that was the key. The key over here throughout anybody was clean air. Carlos Sainz did an extended stint to try to get as much clean air as he could. They left Lando Norris out a couple extra laps and not covering off Sainz right away because they wanted to get the McLaren in clean air. Piastri, when he was leading for his stint, even remarked on the radio how much important clean air was. If he's in front of Hamilton there and even behind Russell, I don't think Hamilton passes him. It was that tight between the two of them. Can you blame it on all of the pit stop? Maybe. It was a driver error. I mean, he definitely overcooked it, whether he just locked up at the end or whatever happened. He took out the Jack guy, and we learned who the Jack guy was in the Giles Richards interview. That was the guy you saw. So go check out our Giles Richards interview and learn all about the McLaren Jack guy who you saw almost get ran over and who did one hell of a job. I mean, it's a hell of a job that it was only a 4.4 second stop because he was way past his marks on that one. So it was there. There was a shot. There was definitely an opportunity there. But I don't know, even if you take the 2 seconds away, I think even when he came back out, he was 4-point-something seconds even behind Hamilton at that point. So I don't know that it changes the order. It would have been interesting to see had Piastri gotten within to true DRS without Hamilton also having DRS as well. And if he would he have still run out of laps the way that he did? Now, and then the other side of that is part of what brought Piastri back was the bit of the exchange between Russell and Hamilton when Hamilton got to the DRS, starts to make moves. So that, I mean, whenever you have two cars come in combat with one another, they naturally slow down. And all of a sudden, here came Piastri in the last 3 laps. He went from 5.2 seconds down to 1 point. He was within Lewis's DRS at the end. And basically, it looked like ran out of laps. I don't know if he gets past Hamilton because of how hard it was to overtake. Would have been an interesting thing to see. I wish we would have had another lap to find out. But unfortunately, we didn't. He got to the party just as the party was ending, and we never got to see him do a dance, basically. It's kind of how I think about it. But, yeah, I mean... as a fan, I have to remember not to get frustrated when, they hit their point average. They're averaging 28 points or something over the course of the last 2 months. It's the 10th consecutive podium with a McLaren on it. So that is really, really good. And if this is an off day at the office, they're going to look really good, I think, in the second half of the season. They're definitely going to have chances. That's where they're at. They can win any race moving forward. I think certain tracks will favor them better. I actually think the next track coming out of the break will favor them a lot in Zandvoort because it is twisty, it is tight, it's a lot like Hungary in that it's very hard to overtake, and qualifying is a big deal. So if they can get in front of a Red Bull at certain points, they have a very good chance to win the race, especially if it's not tricky, wet, changeable conditions. If you're a McLaren fan now, you've been pining all for the last 10 years. You've been sitting there pining for rain, for whatever to change the conditions to maybe get in your favor. Now you want sunny, no wind, no rain, nothing. You want normal service throughout the course of the weekend because that's when their car is at its best.
Agreed.
All right. And so now the other bit of news that has broken post-race. Carlos Sainz, who we have said was the linchpin to this driver market, who has talked up and down the grid, I think to every team rep at one point, saying, please, dear Lord, would somebody come sign me, has agreed and has chosen Williams. He will partner with Alex Albon at the Grove team in 2025 on a multi-year deal. That came out this morning. So now we have our answer. Sainz goes to Williams. That obviously will mean Logan Sargent will no longer be with Williams moving forward. More than likely out of an F1 on-track every weekend drive. That's not necessarily surprising. So what are your thoughts on this move? It's definitely a move not for today, but for a couple years from now when Williams might be really good.
I think it's a really good move for him based on what was left for him to get. And we know that Sainz was holding out probably as long as possible in the hopes that he might somehow score a top seat. Nobody is officially in that second Mercedes seat. Mercedes is looking really good right now, so maybe he was holding out hope for that. But finally got to the point where he needed to sign with somebody, it seems. And I didn't think for a minute that he was going to be off the grid next year. He was going to end up with somebody, just maybe not his top choice. And it sounds like this Williams deal is going to be really good for him. It's for 2025, 2026. And my understanding is that he has the option to leave the team for greener pastures after that, if he so desires and has the opportunity to do so. But Williams really looks like the top choice out of the three bigger contenders for him right now. We all thought at the beginning of the season when the news about Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari came out that he was going to be taking a seat at the will-be Audi team. And at the time, that sounded like a great idea because he'd be going into a new works deal. He'd be having the opportunity to build that team around him as it becomes Audi, and hopefully becomes stronger than it is now. But that the state of the to-be Audi team and Sauber, it just looks so kind of tenuous and up in the air at the moment as to what's actually going to happen. Sauber has not been performing very well. As we discussed on the preview, there's been a lot of shakeup at the top for personnel at Sauber Audi here going into when they're going to actually be joining the grid as Audi. And as you discussed, we're not even really 100% sure what's going to go on with their engine program. So I'm guessing Sainz probably looked at that and said, it's too much questionable stuff. I'm going to stick with Williams, who seems to be going in the direction of being more organized, moving up. They've got lots of good funding now. They got James Vowles, who seems to be a very capable in the team principal role. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see Williams with a very strong driver's lineup. I do feel bad that we're not going to have American representation on the F1 grid anymore, and probably for the foreseeable future again. But I just don't think Logan Sargent was cutting it. I think it's going to be much more exciting to see Sainz up against Albon and, get to see two drivers that are in the prime of their career right now being up against each other.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, I think you said it best when you said it was the best of what was left. He wasn't going to be able to fit into any of what are currently your top four clear representatives of the top of the grid right now. The Mercedes seat just doesn't seem viable. It definitely feels more and more like Kimi Antonelli is going to get confirmed there at some point. It's just a question of when they want to do that. Mercedes seem in no rush to want to name anybody into that second seat, so that may be one of the last ones that gets filled. You look over at Audi and you say, well, they went and got Mattia Binotto, and that still couldn't close the deal. And I don't know if that changed the dynamic or didn't. If Seidel had remained, maybe it's a different discussion. But apparently they let Seidel go at Audi because he couldn't sign Carlos Sainz, and then the guy who they brought in still couldn't sign Carlos Sainz. So you've got Nico Hulkenberg and giant question mark who's going to go into that seat if you're Audi right now, because the top talent appears not to really want your drive at the moment. As for what Williams is getting, I think if they can continue on the trajectory, and this year they've admitted was all about kind of going to the bottom of the crap. And they've kind of now completely unwound all of the crap and are now starting to come back. It is a long process. You don't just boomerang unless you have something that nobody else has and you just magically find it. You can't just go from the back to the front within a year. It doesn't work that way in this sport. It takes time. You got to build it. They're in the process now of doing that. If they can be ready for 2026 or as ready as everybody else is, that's a really good thing for them, so they can come out and try to be competitive into that rules reg when those come out. I don't even think they're really worried about 2025. They're going to try to get as much out of 2025 as they can. They'll try to design the car to meet whatever, cure whatever faults they can get to. But I don't think they're super aspirational about 2025. To them, it's all about 26. So you get Sainz in, you get him a year to acclimate, you get everybody familiar with how he drives, what he likes to do, how he likes to set up the car, etc. Get now 2 experienced versions of feedback from both Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon, who have both driven at the sharp end and at the back end in their careers. So that's important to go on the journey. So I do think that that's a good thing for Williams. I think Williams, I would say that is a plus signing for them to get a guy of the caliber of Carlos Sainz into your camp. As for Logan Sargent, I've said many times, I thought this was to get American representation on the grid was a great thing. Unfortunately, I think he came into possibly one of the worst case scenarios that you could have hoped for, with a team that was foundering at the back, unpacking all of its crap literally while he was driving for them. Did not help him, never really got on top of the car, never was able to show even some of the good stuff that he could do. And let's face it, let's be honest, he couldn't keep the car on the track. So good, bad, or indifferent, the one thing you can control is keeping the car on track. I don't mind if you're slow, but if you keep the car together, at least that's something, and he couldn't do that. So I do think we will see Logan Sargent in other forms of racing. There's definitely still a career to be had there. Could be an IndyCar drive, could be a sports car drive. I think he'd fit in really well. I see like him and Magnussen. If Magnussen wants an IndyCar drive, he could have it. I think Logan Sargent would have to do some convincing, but I think he would fit in better with how we race over here. I think his F1 experience would benefit him at certain places like the Indy Road Course or Road America in Wisconsin. I think he would also drive really well there. So I think there are chances for him to get some glory in his career. And you never know when the merry-go-round may come back to you. I mean, Nick DeVries got a second shot, and we never thought that was going to happen. Stoffel Van Dorn went off to Formula E and won a championship there. So there are still other places other than Formula One for a guy like Logan Sargent who I believe still can wheel a car in certain situations. It just didn't work out here. All right. So that concludes what our thoughts on the Belgian GP and all of the fun news that has broken Sunset. We're going to take a quick break. We will re-rack. We will come back. We will do a few things. One, we're going to tell you where all the points shake out after the Russell DQ and after this round of the championship. We've got some fan emails to react to, got some awards to hand out. Predictions are back. We will take a look at those. And then we'll try to figure out what we're going to do during our break because we actually have one for a few weeks. But we will try to do some stuff to keep you entertained throughout the course of the break. I've got some ideas, and I'll share them with you next. Come on back. You won't want to miss it. You are listening to the Outlap F1 podcast, and we'll be right back after this quick pit stop. Grab your flu powder, broomstick, or apparate to your favorite audio streaming service to join the discussion on Hogwarts, a podcast, where Dan and his friends have in-depth chapter-by-chapter breakdowns of each Harry Potter novel. Join the group as they dive into the magical world and discuss plot points, analyze character development, and occasionally go off the rails. Whether you're a muggle who's new to the series or a pure-blood wizard who won't need a remember-all, Hogwarts, a podcast, brings everyone to the Great Hall for a magical discussion. Hogwarts, a podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome back, everybody. This is season 6, episode 30. And yes, I'm trying to keep myself awake. It's the Belgian GP review show on the Outlap F1 podcast. And you've got Andy and I'm along with Cody tonight. And we're recording by the dawn's early light or the last evening's lateness. But anyways, just kind of when we ended up having to do that. But welcome back in. We just finished talking about the Belgian GP and all the drama and all the news that broke even the day after the Belgian GP. So now we're going to look at where the standings shook out after the Russell DQ, after all the points are tallied. Cody, let's take a look at the top 10 on the drivers, and then I'll chime in with the team standings.
All right. In first place, and kind of still surprisingly, somehow extending his championship lead this race. Number 1, Max Verstappen with Red Bull. He sits at 277 points, which puts him still a pretty good way ahead of P2, which is Lando Norris, driving for McLaren, at 199 points. Just a little bit behind him, Charles Leclerc holding on to P3 with Ferrari at 177 points. Oscar Piastri starting to catch up to the top 3 now. He is in 4th in the other McLaren at 167 points, so only 10 points behind Charles Leclerc now. 5th place is Carlos Sainz in the other Ferrari at 162, so I believe he fell behind Oscar Piastri after this Belgian Grand Prix. Number 6, Lewis Hamilton, getting good points out of the win this time. He's the top Mercedes at 150 points. Sergio Perez, 7th place in the other Red Bull with 131 points. 8th place, George Russell, unfortunately not getting a single point out of his awesome performance this race. He is the 2nd Mercedes, and he is down in 8th with 116 points. 9th place, pretty good gap, as we've talked about several times here, back between those top 4 teams and everyone else. 9th place, Fernando Alonso with Aston Martin. He sits at 49 points. And his teammate in 10th place, Lance Stroll, in the other Aston Martin, sitting at 24 points.
Yeah, you want to talk about just a swing. George Russell would have been 1 point behind Lewis Hamilton had the result actually stuck. Would have been in front of Sergio Perez. Instead, he drops now behind Sergio Perez. And you have to wonder, given the news we just talked about with Perez remaining at Red Bull, was that enough to keep Perez in that seat till the end of the season? Because he can say he's not the last point scorer in the top 4 teams. You wonder, what was the mitigating factor? I wish Netflix were in that meeting somehow. I just want to hear it come out as to what happened. But
if
maybe we'll get there
on that kind of technicality. Man, like someone's looking out for him.
Well, and it's also because he's well funded, and I'm sure it would be an expensive thing to break that contract. And as I've been saying, Red Bull don't want to do that. They're only going to do it if they don't think there's another option. And apparently they've either invented one or they still see something. So I know Checo's got a lot of fans worldwide. I'm not trying to offend, the guy that I know they all love, and he's got a great career and he should be nothing but thankful. And he's had an amazing run, but it feels like it's coming to an end, but we'll see. I've been proven wrong many times before. I will be more than happy to be proven wrong again in the case of Sergio Perez here. As for those team standings after this round of the championship, Red Bull Racing powertrains continue to lead. They're up to 408 points, but it is getting close, and it is getting almost within a Grand Prix distance. P2, McLaren, Mercedes, they probably benefited the most from the Russell DQ of anybody in terms of championship standings because they moved up and I think scored an additional 5 points. So it is down to 30 or 44 points. So it is 42 points. 8 minus 6 is 2. Do my math right. 408 less 366. It is almost within a Grand Prix distance if McLaren do maximum points and Red Bull score nothing. So moving into the second half of the season, if that continues to tighten up, we shall see. P3 is Ferrari. They are in with 345 points. P4 is Mercedes. They are up to 266 points. And here's the chasm. P5, Aston Martin, they check in with 73 points. So they did have two guys in the points this weekend. P6 is the VCarb team. They check in with 34 points. P7 is Haas, not far behind the VCarbs with 27 points. P8 is Alpine, now into double digits. So now we have 8 teams in double digits this season. They are up to 11 points. P9 is Williams with the 4 points that they have. And still in P10, still with no points on the board, and not looking like it's going to come anytime soon. The Kick Sauber Ferraris with 0 points. Okay, so you've heard our takes on the Belgian GP and our take on the Russell DQ and all of that. We will now turn it over to the fan email segment. I do have to preface some things. Some of these came in before the DQ was announced. Some of them happened and sent follow-ups after the DQ, so they may have taken back some of the other things they said. And one of them came in earlier today. So we do have 3 of them. Cody, it's your time to shine. They are in the order in which I received them, so we'll kind of let you figure this out. But here we go. Cody, take it away.
All right. Our first fan email comes from Dave Doherty. Thank you, Dave. And he says, "Hello, team. Very happy with the Mercedes win. They are truly back. But what was your thoughts on the Mercedes strategy? And it looks like Oscar is the real deal for McLaren. He has the desire to race. But F1 is back at its best." Now, I do agree that F1 is probably at the some of the best that I have ever seen it, despite it not being the most competitive that I've seen it for the championship win. I think in all the time that I've been a pretty diehard Formula One fan, that this is the closest it's been between so many teams. So I agree that we're back at the best there. It's a little hard to tell from Dave's tone here if this came. I'm guessing this one probably came.
This was pre.
The disqualification.
This was pre DQ, not
so
post DQ.
You managed to squeeze in that little window before you got disqualified, which is too bad. Ironically,
he did have an hour and a half.
Yeah. It's still good. It's still a pretty small window in the grand scheme of things, though, with how long FIA can take with this stuff.
That's true.
You're still right on the Mercedes win, though, and this one goes to Hamilton, so I'm sure there's a lot of very happy fans out there for that one. I really didn't think that Hamilton would be getting 2 wins this season at the beginning of the year, so it's great for him. I really do think George deserved this one, so I feel bad that he didn't get it with that interesting call. As far as the strategy goes, I thought that it was a really good gut call from George, knowing that the tires were going to degrade less and that he was going to be able to make those hards last the rest of the race. And I think that really shows his maturity in the car now, that he's able to make those kind of calls and have it work out as well as it did. I mean, he only missed out on a really cool win by a small technical infringement. It's not like the car was super underweight. So it's really too bad. I thought that his call on that strategy was really really interesting.
Yeah, and the contrast between George Russell being decisive, firm, willing to take the risk, wanting to take the jump, really not thinking he had anything to lose, versus not only everybody else, but go back a couple races when we talked about the radio transmissions between Lando Norris and that pit wall, especially in Great Britain, when we went through the entire gamut of who's running what and what else, what is everybody else doing, and help me make this decision. And ultimately Lando's in the car. He's got to be able to feel it. And I do think that that's something that is holding him back. And you're seeing now Russell and Lando have kind of the same experience. So Russell's able to kind of make those definitive calls, and it is something that I hope as a Lando fan he will learn and start to do in the future, in the near future. Full props to George for making that call. Like I said, DQs just generally are hard to explain and hard to deal with. It was what it was. But in terms of the overall Mercedes strategy, they were going to get a win either way, it looked out. They definitely did, I thought, as it turned out, the right thing on the Hamilton side. They set him up for success, and he would have, in any other track at any other place, he easily passes Russell there. And, I think it's a combination of that new surface. First year of a new surface is always interesting. So it may not be the case next year, where I bet next year we're going to see more traditional tire wear. We're probably not going to see it be like this because it's going to go through a whole winter. It's going to go through a summer series of sports car races and karting races and other things that go on this track during the course of the season before F1 gets to it. I know they had that kind of going into it, but again, it's still the first year of a new surface, so you always get something a little bit different, and that's what we ended up getting. To your question on Oscar, I think he's feeling the confidence for sure right now. He definitely sounded, of the two drivers, he was probably the better of the two all the course of the weekend. I think Lando needs the break to kind of unplug, reset, and hopefully come back. But I definitely, I've always said I thought this guy was a real deal. There was a reason he was so sought after. There was a reason that tweet was as epic as it was a couple years ago, because this was the guy that everybody wanted. And Zach Brown, whether you like him or you hate him, went out and got it done and got him signed. So, and now they're reaping the fruits of that. And it's going to be important because on weekends that Lando wasn't at his best, there was Oscar to pick it up. So a P2 at the end of the day looks really good, at least on paper, for sure. And he was not far off the win.
This might be a little controversial to you, Andy, but I think that next season Oscar Piastri is going to score more points than Lando Norris.
We'll see. We shall see. I would make a bet. I will make a bet on that one when we go into it next year. I'll tell you that one right now.
All right. You're on.
All right. Sounds good. All to be revealed what we're going to do with that.
All right. Our next fan email comes from Rachel Fleming. Thank you, Rachel. And I did take a quick scan through this, and it cracks me up a little because it appears that you were writing this as news was coming to light. So funny to see that. But Rachel says, do you guys remember how upset and negative I was after the first podcast of the season after that 1-2 finish for Red Bull in Bahrain? Well, since Miami, F1 has shut me right up. What a season it has been. That call from Russell today was simply outstanding. He knew he could keep others behind him and use the tires, and he did. I didn't think he would win this race, but he shut me right up. What a brilliant win, a win worthy of the best. As for who really should have won this race, well, going from 2nd to 8th and being boxed to get him out of the way, going from 2nd to 8th and being boxed to get him out of Max's way is sure the final call of Sergio Perez's time at Red Bull. And we have since learned that it was not yet the final call. He was given the task of keeping both McLarens behind, and I think because of the pace Max showed before Sunday, I also think Red Bull were expecting him to win this race, and he didn't do either job. So, you guys think Lawson or Danny Rick will get the seat? I'm calling it Danny Rick for Red Bull, Lawson at RB, and Perez at Williams for the rest of the season, with Logan Sargent being the unlucky driver to drop out. I'm hoping it's not true, but I have heard that Logan and James Vowles have fallen out as well. And Gasly's car did not fail. He has had a really awful run of form as far as reliability goes lately. Progress at last, and a point for Ocon. Finally, I've forgotten what the Dutch national anthem has sounded like. However, we have the Olympics to remind us for the summer break. However, if George's car is underweight, and this is the part where I think the news is starting to come out, if George's car is underweight, then what an absolute disaster for George. And then it is official. Great race from George, but still, if the car is underweight, it's underweight. Second time in 2 races that Merck have messed up with fuel for George's car. Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. Definitely agree that it was tough luck for George, but also, pretty black and white thing there that, if the car is underweight, it's underweight no matter how small an amount. It still is worthy of a disqualification. We did see that, today that Sergio Perez will be sticking around in the Red Bull seat for now. So we're not going to get anything so crazy yet, at least for Perez going over to Williams for the rest of the season. As things stand right now, if he were to get kicked out before the season's over, or even at the end of the season, I would peg Daniel Ricciardo for taking the second Red Bull seat. Although I feel that the one who really deserves it is Lawson. I would really be much more interested in seeing him at least getting into some kind of Formula One seat. I think if they get rid of Perez at the end of the season and they fill up that second Red Bull seat with Daniel Ricciardo, then Lawson will get an RB seat, which would be really interesting to see. And I do think that he really deserves to be in Formula One. So I personally think that's the direction we're going. It seems like Red Bull is dead set on not kicking out Perez until the end. And what I actually think might happen at this point is the way things are headed, it could cost them the Constructors Championship. And if it does, they're definitely going to have the grounds to kick him out. There's got to be something in his contract that says, like, yeah, if we lose the Constructors because of you, you're toast.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a. I mean, I think Rachel throws out a really nice scenario as to what could have, or maybe even should have happened. There was a lot of debate on the chats that I was in after the race about, what could happen. And it certainly seemed from what Helmut Marko had even come out and said to Dutch media that it sounded like he was really pissed with the Perez effort and all of this, and that they set him up for success. And then, yet again, he's the last one of everybody on the road and all of that. And yet here we have, they're sticking with him. It just boggles my brain. It does not seem to want to compute. And I think it's just going to bother a lot of people. And Rachel, if you're bothered by this, you have every right to be, because it doesn't seem to want to make sense. The one thing I didn't get a chance to do, and I will at some point do this, is I wanted to look at Sergio Perez last year, where he finished at these different races that are coming up. And I don't think it's all that great either.
No, he really fell off like right around the same time.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at almost a carbon copy of last year, and it just doesn't seem to want to get any better. And we have, it's like rinse, reuse, and repeat. They rinse him off, they set him up for success. He's in the best car, second best car on the grid, or maybe even third best car on the grid, depending. I mean, I don't know. It's so close between right now, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, and throw in a Ferrari, sprinkle in Ferrari here and there. You really can't really put much between them. So, but yet he's never in that mix. We've not seen a teammate be there to really support Max. Now, what you had with the McLarens was one driver having an off weekend, and there was Piastri to pick it up. And, that's kind of why they're closing the gap as quickly as they have. So yeah, somebody there's an X factor to this that we're not knowing. That there has to be, because it doesn't seem to make sense from all legitimate data-driven analyses that we've tried to do with it. But anyway, he's there. We're just going to have to deal with it. In terms of we talked about the Russell call. I thought it was an outstanding call. It is one of those things I wish that other drivers that I root for would do more of. That type of thing. It just sucks that it was underweight. And like I said, somebody at Mercedes obviously dropped a ball somewhere, and they know it. And I think they knew it, right? when they once he crossed the line, because that was the most subdued Toto Wolff I've ever seen. No pounding of table in glory or anything. And then they all come out to do the photo, and I did watch the Ted's notebook, and that was just as that document from the FIA came out. And they all disappeared. And then the trophies magically disappeared. And I've already seen the social media post of the handoff of P2 from Mercedes to McLaren. They literally walked it down the paddock and handed it off. So at least they tried to make light of what is a very painful situation.
Yeah. All right. Thank you again, Rachel. And our last fan email comes from John. Yes, that John. Thanks, John. It's good to hear from you. And he says, wow, wild weekend for sure. Sometimes you need some luck, and Lewis got it this weekend. At the same time, though, you have to be in position to take advantage of others' misfortune. And I'm glad it worked out for him today to add to the record books. Interesting how, like just a month ago, Mercedes could have been thrilled to be so close to a podium, and now their drivers are disappointed with P2. Hopefully this season keeps heating up at the top of the table. Talking about the disappointed with P2, that would be Lewis Hamilton sounding pretty disappointed with his P2 at the end of the race. Honestly, I think Hamilton probably would have cruised to a pretty smooth victory had they had George stick to the planned strategy. I think really at that point, the only one that could have maybe given him a run for his money would have been Piastri. But yeah, they're definitely in a whole other world than they were even from the beginning of this season, where they're fighting for wins. I think, what have we said now? That Mercedes has won 3 of the last 4 Grand Prix or something like that. So they're back, and they're, probably not going to have enough this season to, fight their way up to, any kind of championship hopes for either championship. But I think this has to have Mercedes feeling really, really good, especially in the wake of Hamilton leaving, that at the very least their car is now finally going in the right direction, that they're making real gains and now fighting at the front for wins. And we keep talking about what we think we're going to see next season. I think next season is going to be a ball, because I think we're kind of we're getting closer to that development ceiling, right? And I think we have so many teams now that are at equal performance at this point in the season that if we're all this close at the beginning of next season, it's going to be a brawl for who ends up coming out on top. And I am ready for it, because if they do actually go through with the 2026 regs as expected and on time, it could be the last season we have like this for a little while.
Yeah, fully agree with that. Mercedes is kind of in the same math hole that I was saying that McLaren was for a very long time as well, because, they came to the party a little bit late in the start of the season, and so did Mercedes. And now, I don't think it's going to take a lot for them to really climb up in the constructors for sure. Their driver standings are going to get a solid 4th, 5th is definitely possible. I think there. So there's a lot for them to play for. That's absolutely for sure. And they're going to be in contention for race wins. You're going to have what we've wanted for all this time, where certain tracks favor a Mercedes. There's going to be tracks that McLaren are going to be good at. There's going to be tracks that Red Bull are going to be good at. There's going to be the odd track where Ferrari's going to find it. And Ferrari can still develop and come back. And if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, you might want to see some development at Ferrari before the end of the season, because that dynamic is going to be very, very interesting 12 months from now, if that's not going according to what the plan is. So that's a whole story that I know is coming. We're not there. But as I mentioned this in the pre-race, or in the pre-show when Cody and I were just talking, we are in, I think I had the sign before, welcome to competitive racing. Well, we're living in competitive racing. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. Any one of seven drivers, I'm not counting Perez because he's got to show me he can do it, but any one of those 7 drivers on any given weekend, if they get it right and their teams get their stuff right, can win a race. When is the last time you said that about Formula One? Anything. Even in 2012, which was a great season, you never had 7 guys that you thought could go into any race weekend and possibly win. We're going to go to Zandvoort. If you're a Mercedes fan, you should feel confident because they got a lot of low-speed corners. If you're a McLaren fan, you should be confident because it's tight and twisty, and maybe that it's harder to overtake, and if they have a straightforward weekend, they could do it. If you're a Red Bull and a Max fan, you better be confident because it's Max's home race, and that gives him a boost. There's no doubt about that. And if you're a Ferrari fan, you got Charles Leclerc, one of the best qualifiers out there, and Carlos Sainz, who could definitely wheel a car every now and again, too, and can pounce on something if somebody fumbles it. So you've got all of it. There it is. Welcome to competitive racing. We're here. What a concept.
Agreed. And I hope it doesn't go anywhere.
Also agree fully. All right. Well, thank you to everybody who contributed to our fan email segment. This is always fun. I do love reacting to the different takes on all of this. It was fun to watch Rachel Fleming continue to DM me as I would tweet and then I'd get a new DM and I would tweet and I'd get a new DM. So thank you, Rachel, for sticking with it on social media as that story broke. I did my best to try to bring it to you as soon as I could find it. As soon as I was hearing trouble, saw the decision desk or the FIA decision thing go up, I was trying my best to get that out there. It's always kind of fun to do that. You feel like a journalist for a half a minute there. But anyway, we will now move into our awards, and we shall start with the rubbish. Cody, you lit him up. I love this. Cody, what you got here for your rubbish?
Yeah, my rubbish award is going to go to Sergio Perez because he really shouldn't have gone that far backwards. I could understand, losing out on a couple positions, but he was at the front row and should have been in contention to win the race. He was in the preferred position. My understanding is that being in the pole position at the Belgian Grand Prix can almost hamper you a little bit, that the P2 position is almost the better place to start from. He was right there, and maybe could have gotten in the lead, gotten some clean air. I really think he should have been in contention to win this, and yet he falls back to, on the road, the last finisher of those top four strong teams. It's it's not funny. He's literally on the road to costing Red Bull the Constructors' Championship, and at the beginning of the season, it looked like it was going to be a no-brainer. So I really don't know what's happened. I don't know if his confidence is just completely gone. I don't know if it's just the car at this point really, really doesn't agree with his driving style. But Red Bull is continuing to put their faith in him, and I just really hope for their sake that it doesn't come back to bite them in the butt. We're just going to have to wait and see, I suppose.
My theory is, believe it or not, I think it's age. And I think we are, as an F1 fandom, so spoiled because we have two unicorns still racing in both Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. Because the conventional wisdom is you don't get any faster the older that you get. And there's a certain crossover point at which you don't necessarily gain any more speed. And I think Sergio Perez just has never been on that unicorn level. And that doesn't mean that he's a bad driver. He's in the Hall of Very Good. He's going to have some great stats in his career. But I think it's just age. But that's my theory. But anyway, we'll leave that there. But my rubbish award just goes to the fact that disqualifications just plainly suck all the way around. And everyone did their jobs, and everyone followed the right process, and I'm not complaining about that. I'm not lighting the FIA up. They did it by the book, 100%. That's how you do it. But it's really hard when you're trying to explain 3 hours after a race ends, or however long it is, if you watch the race with a friend, and I was texting you that it happened, and I don't know if you were shocked or amazed or couldn't believe it, but I know you and I had both watched the same race, and I was perfectly happy to start my agenda with, George Russell taking the win and had a whole different headline for all of that. And then you got to go, well, no, that didn't happen. And technically he was never there. And then you watch the replay and you watch George Russell on the podium and it just leaves it hollow. It's a hard thing for the sport. I don't know how you solve it. I don't have a good solving solution for it. But it just sucks. So it goes in the rubbish bin for me. So anyway, we'll move on to analysis paralysis. I'll go first on this one. I think there's really no other candidate here. Really not sure how that car got underweight. That's got to be more than just tire buildup. I know that's the explanation that we're given, but it just tells me somebody screwed up on that one, and we're just not finding out who. And I don't know that I ever really want to find out at this point. I'm not looking to end a career here, but somebody dropped the ball, and that can't happen, and cost Mercedes 25 points because of it.
Yeah, I agree. Analysis paralysis going Mercedes. I feel like they must have put a decimal in the wrong place somewhere. If it just doesn't seem believable to me that they would be purposefully running their car so close to that knife's edge that an alternate strategy where you wear the tires out a little more and you don't get to pick up those rubber marbles at the end. If those things are making the difference between your car being, underweight and or like safe, you're running too close to the razor's edge. And I think that, to me, that just sells it that it was a mistake that was made, that they didn't intend to run it that closely. And it's really a shame because they had the 1-2 on the cards there, to everyone's surprise, and they just missed out on it.
Yep. Yeah, no, agree fully with your analysis there. All right, we will move on to the dark horse of the day. I'm going to give it to a team that's had a rough go. Alpine, Esteban Ocon getting a hard-earned couple of points there, I thought was actually really good for them. Esteban showing a little more confidence now that his future seems to be secure. So yeah, I'm going to give it to Ocon and Alpine for that one. Cody, what you got?
My dark horse is going to go to Daniel Ricciardo. Had a pretty quiet race. Definitely benefited from the George Russell qualification, but as they say, you have to be there to pick up what's left. And Daniel Ricciardo was there in 11th to be able to move up to 10th and score that point for RB. Definitely had the edge on Yuki Tsunoda this weekend.
All right, very good there. And our final award, the driver of the day. Don't know that I've ever done this one like this before, but I'm going to still give it to George Russell. Dang it. Despite the DQ, dude, I tip my cap. That was one hell of a call. I want that to inspire other people I root for to make calls like that in the future. It's ballsy. It's great. Love the fact that it actually worked. Sucks your car was underweight. But mad respect, George. That was a heck of a thing. So way to go.
Yep. Totally agree. It's not like George Russell had anything to do with the car being underweight. I mean, I suppose he could have, eaten a bigger breakfast that morning or something, but but yeah, he had reasonably no control over that or no knowledge of that the car was going to be underweight. So you kind of have to set that aside from his driving performance, which for the day was fantastic. Made the strategy call, going against what the team had planned. And he made it work. He made the tires last to the end and managed to come out with the win on the road. So for that, he gets driver of the day.
All right. Very good. And the predictions game was back and in full swing. I actually benefited from the DQ more than it hurt me. It didn't help your podium out really well there, Cody, but you finished with 2 points. You did get P2 on the podium with Oscar Piastri coming in P2. And you got the pole sitter because you did predict Max to take the pole, so I tip my cap to you there. I got the 2 lap times. I finished the weekend with 5 points. I got the 2 lap times because I just went slower. It wasn't really all that close, but I guess I get the point there. Now what it did do, the DQ did help my bonus picks. I got P6 on the bonus pick and P8 in the bonus pick, and I did get the prop bet because I did have enough faith for Sergio to at least come home in the points. And he kept his drive because of it.
And I would have had it.
You might very well be right. And if one more lap, Oscar Piastri might win this race after the George Russell disqualification, too. So, ifs and nuts and all of that. But anyway, we have reached the end of our rundown. This will be probably the last show for a little bit. But I am going to do some cool stuff. I intend to take the Giles Richards interview that we did. I'm going to put some short form content out there, keep you guys entertained over the course of the summer. It's such good stuff. It was such a good discussion. I want you guys to be able to see it. Even if you have listened to it, I think it's going to come better. Spread the word about that interview. We are so proud of it. So that's what I'm going to try to do over the course of the break. So you will still see stuff. You'll still see me tweet. If there is F1 news that will break during the course of the time off, I will be there. I check the thing every day when I wake up. It's just habit for me at this point. So I will continue to do that. But then we will be back the week of the 23rd of August. That will be when this madness will kick off again. And it should just pick up right where it left off, you'd think, because we go to Zandvoort. It's a tight track. It's a twisty track. It can have some very interesting weather, as we saw before, which can definitely shake things up, as it did last year. So I'm excited as hell for the second half of this season. 7 guys. Any one of the 7 could easily win. I can't tell you who's going to win. It's going to make the predictions interesting and fun all the way to the end of this season. And even if it's still a Max Verstappen taking the drivers, he's at least had to earn it, and we got to see what happens when that guy gets under pressure. So I'm excited as hell for that. Cody, any final thoughts before we head on out?
I am very excited to see where we go for the rest of the season. Definitely sad that we've gotten to the break, and this year it's almost like going to be a little bit of a tease when we get back, because we got a whole bunch of weeks off here. We come back, we get like 2 or 3 races, and then we go on another break for like 3 weeks or something like that. So going to be a little tease. I think IndyCar is also on a break right now until like mid to late August. So
yeah, they're not back until the 17th. That's
so
that's Gateway.
So got a little break there. I guess if I want to get my racing fix, I'd have to go to like NASCAR or something, which I don't really know how I feel about right now. So
there's IMSA, there's WEC.
What was that?
Sports cars. There's IMSA.
Oh yeah,
this is always a good show.
I'm a big fan of watching like historical Formula One races too.
There's also MotoGP, which is coming back out of its summer break. I think they will be in Silverstone starting next weekend. And if you are a MotoGP fan, by the way, and you want to learn about it or watch it on your own leisure, if you get a subscription to HBO or what they call Max, you can watch it commercial free in the US. You get what was formerly the BT, it's now called TNT Sports coverage of MotoGP. You get every session commercial free. It is a great resource. So if you're a fan of like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon or the cutting movies that they come out, you get this as part of it. You don't have to, it's not a separate tier. It's none of that other stuff. That is my number one way that you would want to consume MotoGP. It's also on True TV, I think. Now, that's a cable channel that not necessarily everybody has. It's a little harder. The best way to consume MotoGP, I'm telling you, is Max. And it is a stream that is live as anything else. So that's what I'll be doing for sure during the break. Yeah, there you go. I will read for you whenever you want. I have a new account. Outlap F1 Podcast is the handle in case you're interested. Look us up. We'll be happy to do it. But anyway, for Cody, it's been Andy. Boy, this first half of the season turned out to be a lot more fun than we ever expected. I cannot wait for the second half. We will be there for it for sure. But until then, may all your laps be fast.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Outlap F1 podcast. If you like what you heard, click that subscribe button and be sure to leave us a 5-star review. If you want to connect with us outside of the show, check out our website at www.outlapf1.com. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at OutlapF1 Podcast, or email us at chatnow@outlapf1.com. As always, thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you on the next one.